In honor of St. Patrick's Day, we're going to tell an Irish folk tale. It's called The Selkie Girl. It's retold by Susan Cooper, and the illustrations are Warwick Hutton. Selkie Girl. The islands rise green out of the sea, where the waves foam over the gray rocks, and strange things may happen here. Donnellan lived in a farmhouse on the biggest island. They called his farmhouse a croft. He had 10 sheep grazing on the hills, and a dog named Angus, and a cat named Cat. His parents were dead. He had no wife and no children, so he lived there alone, and he was often lonely. He would listen to the wind singing in the chimney, and he would wish it were a human voice. One spring morning, Donnellan went down to the beach with his dog Angus for company to rake up the seaweed that he dug in his garden each year. He had gathered a great bale of it when he thought he heard music from the rocks beside the sea. It was like the voice of the wind, but Donnellan was a long way from his chimney. He went to look, and in wonder and delight, he saw 3 beautiful girls sitting on the rocks, totally naked, combing their long hair. One of the girls had fair hair, one red and one dark black. The fair-haired girl was singing. She was the most beautiful of the 3, and Donnellan could not take his eyes from her. He gazed and gazed at her white body and her long-lashed dark eyes, and he listened to her lilting voice singing its wordless song, and he knew suddenly he would never be happy till she was his wife. Then Angus the dog turned from chasing a crab and saw the girls, and he began to growl deep in his throat. The 3 girls looked up startled, and they saw Donnellan and his dog. In an instant, each of them snatched up a shapeless bundle that was sitting next to them on the rocks and plunged over the rocks into the sea. And all at once, they were no longer girls, but selkies, gray seals, 3 sleek shapes, flashing dark through the waves. Donnellan stood on the beach forlorn. "Come back," he said. "Oh, please, come back." But there was nothing there but the empty sea. Donnellan went home sadly, carrying his bale of seaweed, and on the way home, he met Old Thomas. Old Thomas was the oldest man in the village, and he had a bad leg. He walked with a cane. He only had 3 teeth in his whole mouth. He had sharp eyes, and he noticed that Donnellan seemed something was wrong. "And what is the matter with you, Donnellan?" he said. "Did the sea take your boat in exchange for that fine seaweed?" Donnellan sighed. "Oh, I am in love." And he told Old Thomas about the beautiful vanished girls that had changed into seals. "Oh, dear me," said Old Thomas, whistling through his 3 teeth. "A bad choice ye have made. For those are the daughters of the king of Loch Lam, way beyond the sea's brim, and they are selkies indeed. Just once a year, on the 7th day of the highest tides of spring, they get the land longing on them, and they slip out of their skins and take human form." "Oh, I love her. I love the fair-haired one," Donnellan said. "I want her to be my wife." "There's only one way for that," Old Thomas said. "What is it then?" said Donnellan quickly. "Tell me! Tell me!" Old Thomas looked thoughtfully at Donnellan. "And what will you give it to me if I tell ye?" "Oh, I'll give you this fine bale of seaweed for your garden," Donnellan said, "and one like it every year." "Will you carry it to me croft?" I will. "And dig it into the soil?" Yes. Donnellan snatched Old Thomas up from the ground, perched him on top of the seaweed bale, and carried him off to his croft. Old Thomas grinned down at him. "You must wait until that same day next year," he said, "in the 7th stream of the flood tide in spring. And then if you are still foolish enough to be in love, you must go to that rock and steal the bundle that is beside the Selkie girl when she is out of the sea. For that is her skin, and without it she cannot become a seal again. You must not destroy it, or she will die. But as long as you keep it safe and hidden, she will follow you and stay with you." Donnellan shouted for joy. Old Thomas said quietly, "But remember, A wild thing will always go back to the wild in the end. Donalyn paid no heed to that at all. He waited a year, then he went to the rocky beach on the 7th day of the spring flood tides. There were the 3 girls again, the fair-haired one singing even more bewitchingly than before. Donalyn crept up to the rock where they sat. The dark-haired girl caught sight of him and cried out in warning, and all 3 girls dived at once into the sea. But Donalyn had hold of the bundle of the seal skin of the girl that he loved. She begged him from the waves, "Oh, please, please give me back my skin." Out in the ocean swells, Donalyn could see 2 gleaming shapes swimming, waiting for her, a dark seal and one with a reddish skin. "Come with me," he called to the Selkie girl. "Come with me and be my wife, and I will work for you and love you well, and we shall be happy all our days." He walked away up the beach with her skin, knowing she must follow, and when she came after him, he gave her a soft woolen blanket that had belonged to his mother to cover her. She was crying bitterly, but she followed him. So Donalyn married the Selkie girl, and they lived together in the croft with the dog and the cat and the sheep grazing in the hills. She would not tell him her true name, so he called her Marie. He kept her sealskin hidden, checking it often to make sure it never cracked or dried out. After the first day, she never asked for it again. Marie worked as hard as Donalyn on the croft, and because he was gentle and loving, she did not weep anymore. When their first child was born, he saw her smile, but he never heard her sing again, and each year when the 7th day of the flood tides came round in the spring, he would find her sadly looking out to sea, with her head tilted, as if trying to hear singing. And the years passed, and 5 children were born to Marie and Donalyn, 3 boys and 2 girls, and they were called Dougal, Margaret, Niall, Kate Annie, and James, and they were bright, handsome children with sweet voices and strong backs, and they lived happy in the croft by the sea. Only Kate Annie, who was the thoughtful one, wondered why she sometimes felt that her quiet mother had lost something precious, and Kate Annie wished that she could make it right somehow. One summer day, Donalyn got up very early before the sunrise because it was his day for checking secretly that the sealskin was safe and well. Softly, he went outside and he pulled 3 stones from the wall of the house, which was as thick as a man's arm. He took out the sealskin, he spread it flat on the ground, rubbed it carefully with oil, and then folded it and put it back. He did not know that his youngest son, James, who had come creeping out of the house after him, had seen him. James stared. What was his father doing so secret, so early in the morning? He slipped back indoors to his bed, wondering, what was so special about an old sealskin? Later that day, Donalyn took the 3 oldest children out to the fields. James went outside the house and looked at the wall. He could see the place where his father had moved the stones. He went back to his mother, who was making oat cakes with Kate Annie. "Mother," he said, "why is father keeping an old sealskin in the wall?" Marie stopped mixing the dough. Very slowly, she put down the bowl and spoon on the table. And she looked at James as if she had never seen him before. The children saw a glow of happiness like sunlight in her face, and the first time in their lives, they heard her laugh. "Oh, James," she said, "you have found my skin." She took his hand, and then she took Kate Annie's, and the 3 of them ran outside, and they took the sealskin from the wall, and Marie laughed in delight, and Kate Annie felt warm all over at the sound of it. "Come," said Marie to them with the skin in her arms, as she led them down to the sea. Kate Annie felt frightened, and yet she knew that something right was happening, whatever it might be. Their mother said to them, "Be brave, because I must leave you.
I was brought here from my own people against my will 20 years ago, and I have 5 children on land and 5 children in the sea, and that is a hard case to be in. Kate Annie said, "We have brothers and sisters in the sea?" "You have," she said. "So do I." "Don't go," James said, and he blinked hard because he knew he was about to cry. "I love you," Marie said, and she stroked his hair. "I shall never be far away." She raised her head and looked out over the sea. "You must go to them. It's their turn now," Kate Annie said. And she took her brother's hand. "I'll look after James." Marie stepped into the sea and smiled at the wash of the waves about her feet. She said, "I shall always be here watching over you, whether you are on the island or in the water. I promise you. And every year, at the 7th stream of the flood tide in spring, you will see me as I am here now, before you as a woman." She kissed them and she dived into the sea, holding the sealskin. Out in the ocean swells, they saw 2 gleaming shapes appear, swimming, waiting for her, a dark gray seal and one with reddish skin. And then suddenly there were 3, as a light-colored seal joined them, and they 3 curved and swirled and dived and swam in the foaming waves with great joy. And then they were gone. "Is she drowned?" James said. "Of course not," said Kate Annie. "Let's go home and finish the oatcakes." They told Donalyn when he came back. He said sorrowfully, "Old Thomas was right in the end." None of the children understood what he meant. Whenever Donalyn and his children went fishing, and all the years afterwards, their nets took 3 times as many fish as those of anyone else. And when a storm churned the waves and threw wrecks of the boats on the shore, their boat was safe. And there were those that said they had seen the great gray seals carrying the boat to safety. In spring, at the flood tide, the family would go down to the rocks by the sea, and they would come back with a look on their faces like sunlight. And still today, if you listen to the wind blowing around Donalyn's house, there is a singing that seems to come from the sea. The islands rise green out of the sea, where the waves foam over the gray rocks, and strange things